Imagine a world where the only way to measure temperature was by feeling the heat with your hand. No thermometers, no scales, just the touch of your skin. This might sound strange, but it was the reality for most of human history. In the 17th century, a man named William Harvey changed everything. His discoveries about the circulation of blood were revolutionary, but they faced intense criticism from the scientific community of his time. This is the story of how Harvey's work, and the work of other pioneers like Santorio Santorio, transformed medicine and our understanding of the human body. In the early 1600s, the world was a very different place. Medicine was still dominated by the ideas of the ancient Greek physician Galen, who lived in the 2nd century AD. Galen believed that the body was made up of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health, according to Galen, was a balance of these humors, and illness was a result of an imbalance. This theory dominated medicine for over 1,000 years, and it was taught in all the best schools. But in the 17th century, a new way of thinking began to emerge, one that was based on observation and measurement rather than ancient texts. William Harvey was a physician who studied at the University of Padua in Italy. He was a brilliant student and a keen observer. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Harvey was not content to simply repeat what he had learned from ancient texts. He wanted to understand the human body for himself. One of his most significant discoveries was the circulation of blood. At the time, it was believed that the heart only pumped blood to the lungs, and then it was consumed by the body. But Harvey observed that the heart beats continuously, and that the blood must be moving in a circle. He realized that the blood must be returning to the heart, but he couldn't explain how it got from the arteries to the veins. This gap in his theory was a major point of criticism from other scientists. Despite the criticism, Harvey was confident in his observations. He wrote, "I do not profess to learn and teach anatomy from the axioms of the philosophers, but from dissections and the fabric of nature." This statement was a bold challenge to the established order. Harvey was saying that the truth could be found not in ancient texts, but in the careful observation of the human body. His work was groundbreaking, but it was not immediately accepted. Many of his colleagues, like Professor Caspar Hofmann, accused him of being reckless and unscientific. Hofmann argued that Harvey's focus on measurements and calculations was misguided, and that it went against the natural order of things. However, Harvey's work attracted the attention of some respected scientists. One of them was Santorio Santorio, a physician from Venice. Santorio was also a pioneer in the use of measurements and instruments in medicine. He believed that the balance of humors in the body could be measured and quantified. He invented several devices, including a thermoscope, which could measure changes in temperature. Unlike Harvey, Santorio did not provide an absolute scale of temperature. He believed that each person's temperature was unique, and that deviations from an individual's norm were signs of illness. Santorio's work was revolutionary because it introduced a new way of thinking about the human body. Instead of relying on vague, qualitative descriptions, he used precise measurements to understand health and disease. His instruments, like the thermoscope and the hygrometer, were the first steps towards the modern medical instruments we use today. For example, Santorio's thermoscope was a simple device consisting of a bulb filled with liquid and a tube. When a patient breathed on the bulb or held it in their mouth, the liquid would rise or fall, indicating changes in temperature. This was a significant improvement over the old method of feeling the skin with your hand. Santorio also invented a device to measure the pulse rate. He used a pendulum, which he adjusted until its swing matched the patient's heartbeat. The length of the string was then used to calculate the pulse rate. This device, called a pulsiloge, was a precursor to the modern pulse oximeter. Santorio's work was not just about inventing new instruments. It was about changing the way we think about the human body. He believed that by measuring and quantifying the body's functions, we could better understand and treat diseases. The work of Harvey and Santorio was part of a larger shift in the scientific world. In the 17th century, scientists were beginning to use measurements and experiments to understand the natural world. This was a departure from the old way of thinking, which relied on ancient texts and philosophical reasoning. The invention of the thermometer, the barometer, and other instruments was a crucial part of this shift. These instruments allowed scientists to measure things that were previously impossible to quantify. One of the most significant changes was in the way people thought about temperature. Before the 17th century, temperature was a qualitative concept. People described things as hot or cold, but there was no way to measure the degree of heat or cold. The invention of the thermometer changed all that. Scientists like Galileo and Santorio were among the first to use devices to measure changes in temperature. Galileo's thermoscope was a simple device that showed how heat affected the level of a liquid in a tube. Santorio adapted this device to measure changes in the body's temperature. The invention of the thermometer was not just a scientific breakthrough, it had practical applications as well. For the first time, doctors could measure a patient's temperature and use that information to diagnose and treat illnesses. This was a significant improvement over the old method of feeling the skin with your hand. The thermometer also had applications outside of medicine. It was used to measure the temperature of the air, which was important for weather forecasting and other scientific studies. Another important invention of the 17th century was the barometer. The barometer was used to measure changes in air pressure. This was a crucial development because it allowed scientists to understand the relationship between air pressure and weather. The barometer was also used in the development of atmospheric clocks, which used changes in air pressure to keep time. These clocks were a significant improvement over the old mechanical clocks, which required frequent winding. The work of Harvey and Santorio was not just about inventing new instruments. It was about changing the way we think about the human body. They believed that by measuring and quantifying the body's functions, we could better understand and treat diseases. This was a significant departure from the old way of thinking, which relied on ancient texts and philosophical reasoning. The shift from qualitative to quantitative thinking was a crucial part of the scientific revolution of the 17th century. The shift from qualitative to quantitative thinking had far-reaching effects. It changed the way we understood the world and our place in it. For example, the invention of the microscope allowed scientists to see things that were previously invisible. This led to the discovery of microorganisms and a better understanding of diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. The microscope also revealed the intricate structure of cells, which are the building blocks of life. This discovery was a significant step in the development of modern biology. The shift to quantitative thinking also had practical applications. For example, the invention of the thermometer and the barometer allowed scientists to make more accurate weather predictions. This was important for agriculture, navigation, and other activities that were affected by the weather. The thermometer also had applications in industry, where it was used to monitor the temperature of furnaces and other industrial processes. The work of Harvey and Santorio was part of a larger movement that changed the way we think about the world. This movement, known as the scientific revolution, was characterized by a focus on observation, experimentation, and measurement. It was a departure from the old way of thinking, which relied on ancient texts and philosophical reasoning. The scientific revolution had far-reaching effects on medicine, science, and society as a whole. In conclusion, the work of William Harvey and Santorio Santorio was revolutionary. They introduced a new way of thinking about the human body by using measurements and instruments. Their work was not just about inventing new devices, it was about changing the way we understand and treat diseases. The shift from qualitative to quantitative thinking was a crucial part of the scientific revolution of the 17th century. Today, we take for granted the instruments and techniques that they pioneered, but their work was a significant step in the development of modern medicine and science. Their legacy lives on in the devices and methods we use today to understand and improve our health.